Over the past week and a half, there have been injuries, there have been players that have been cut. It is now past 4 p.m. on Tuesday, cut day for teams to get down to their 53-man rosters. I'm still getting notifications on my phone that I will be keeping an eye on in case anything comes across the way while we are filming this. That is important. There have been trades that have not happened. There's holdout news that has happened, and I will be going over all of this and some more. So welcome into the FF Forge. My name is Steve, and I'm just going to be reading a lot of this. There is a lot to go through, and the less I read, the longer it's going to take us to get through this. So let's just get started going. This is not in any great order. I'm going to go through some of the non-injury related items, although it's not injury related sometimes, that we will that has been going on over the past week. So if there have been updates, even if the updates just happened 15 minutes ago, I just came back and filled that information in here. Then I will go over all of the news from training camp practices from last week. Each day I just fill out what happened that day. And I've gone through, cleared that up, so if there's anything that we have final answers on already, got rid of those or updated that information so that you know that those players are A-okay by now, or the severity of that injury, the latest that we know. When it comes to injuries right now, teams do not have to be totally straightforward with us about the extent of those injuries. The soonest we will know will be Monday for the Thursday night games. That's Kansas City and I want to say Detroit maybe. And then it should be Wednesday for the rest of the teams before we really get to know some of the severity of some of these injuries and what's the likelihood of them playing in week one. But I'm sure some information will come out between then and now. And I will also go over the preseason games from this past weekend. So let's get started with those non-new injury items, and let's just get, the elephant in the room out of the way first of all. That's going to be Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor was not traded. He had until basically, it sounds like, through the trade deadline today in order to get traded. That was the expectation. That's what's being reported, is that since he has not been traded, he seems to be, the expectation is at least that he has been, will remain on the PUP list, which means that he will be missing the first 4 weeks of the season at a minimum. So I have dropped him to my running back 26 on my draft list. As a reminder, down in the description you can find a link to my website where you could find all my up-to-date rankings. I will keep those up-to-date through the weekend. You can also find on the website a draft sheet that has, it's a half and half average draft position updated as soon as I will update that draft sheet Thursday. So Friday morning, you can expect that to be updated with my most recent rankings, and then I average that into the most recent ADP, and I will do that on Thursday. So it's as close to as accurate as possible for you with the most recent information I can get going into your drafts this coming up weekend. So yeah, he dropped all the way to running back 26 on my draft list. Still a fairly high risk guy. We don't know what the future is for him this season, but at that point in the draft, I think that the reward for taking that risk potentially is then worth it, and I would be willing to take that risk. Now, on to some other items. Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp returned to practice, and he says, I'm playing week one, which is good news because I drafted him. Dallas, this actually will play out this news item will play out throughout this video. So, as of last week, at some point, I wrote that word is Rico Dowdle is ahead of Malik Davis in the running back room for the number 2 running back spot, and I wrote that Deuce Vaughn would be just safe. We don't have to worry about his role in this offense. He is going to be that third down back or the change of pace back, even though he is a very similar paced back in some ways to the lead back there in Tony Pollard. He's going to have some sort of role on that offense. That has nothing to do with the battle between Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis. And so at that point in time, last week, I replaced Malik Davis in my rankings with Rico Dowdle, and we will find out that that was the right call to make. Did not overreact to that news, at least. Then Buffalo Bills picked up passing down specialist free agent running back Ty Johnson, and that would be the replacement for the Nyheim Hines role on that offense. I believe he must have made the team. I didn't see that if he got cut or not today. Carolina Panthers running back Miles Sanders is back in pads at practice. So he has been practicing. There has been no new injuries that have already popped up or anything like that. Las Vegas Raiders Josh Jacobs is back with the team, y'all. He got his contract. He got paid as of now several days ago. So no worries in drafting him. He was running back 4 in my rankings at one point. I dropped him back to running back 5. I was pretty confident that they were going to figure out this situation. I consider him a top 5 running back. He is 5th in the running back rankings. I ended up not putting him back over Nick Chubb, who I have 4th in my rankings. Tampa Bay, it's official. From the mouth of the head coach, Baker Mayfield will be the starter week 1. Houston, CJ Stroud was also named the starter just a couple of days ago. In week 1, New York Jets are getting their left tackle back, so that should spark some confidence in drafting any and all of their players. That's good news for them. Also, New York Jets wide receiver Corey Davis retired last week on Wednesday. The San Francisco 49ers quarterback Sam Darnold was named the QB number 2, and Trey Lance was traded to Dallas. Chicago tight end Cole Kmet is back at practice, and he is fine, good to go. New England running back Pierre Strong Jr. was traded to the Browns. I wouldn't get overly jacked about that, but it's a fresh new start for a young, talented running back who's frankly not going to some sort of loaded backfield there in Cleveland. So that could be an interesting guy to keep just a rough eye on this season, see if he starts to get some work at any point. Indianapolis running back Kenyon Drake was released earlier this week. New York Jets Mecole Hardman hurt his finger, but he is fine. I believe that was in the last preseason game. And Cleveland also released wide receiver Anthony Schwartz. I don't think anybody was drafting him in fantasy drafts, but all the better for Cedric Tillman. On last week, Saturday, for the Miami Dolphins, Devon Achane had a shoulder injury, which is considered to be week to week. That did not end up having an impact on his draft stock for me. I wasn't planning on playing him week 1 if we didn't get some sort of clear indication that he had won that role or that his usage would be, to some relative extreme where I would think that he would be the best option on my roster. If his injury concerns were a concern for you, however, coming into the draft, then this just verifies your opinion already, and I could understand why that would make you even more scared to draft him. Chicago Bears, Roschon Johnson, I'm seeing that some really positive reports coming out of Chicago on the rookie. A little concerning for my recent rise in confidence on Khalil Herbert. I've talked about this a little bit in some recent videos. I still think that at the least, Khalil Herbert is a semi-safe option for the first portion of the season, first half of the season or so. But he isn't this regime's guy, so let's keep that in mind. Roschon Johnson is. He was drafted by this regime, so all the more reason to be just a little bit concerned about Khalil Herbert. I like where he's going in drafts. I was a little bit higher on him a week, 2 weeks ago now, and now I'm roughly where ADP is at on him. New York Jets Israel Ibanaconda had a thigh contusion in his game last weekend, 2 weekends ago now, and he could be back by week 1. It is not a long-term concern. That is a recent update from, I believe, maybe 2 days ago. On last week's Sunday, 2 weekends ago, Cleveland Elijah Moore returned to practice, and he played in the final preseason game as well. So Elijah Moore is looking good to go. And then on Monday, Washington wide receiver Terry McLaurin has a toe. X-rays were negative. That was I believe that was in a Sunday game. He has turf toe, which is considered to be a minor case of turf toe, so that's good. He was said to be day-to-day, but it is turf toe. And that concerns me a bit. I've had turf toe. I got it walking up some stairs, and then my toe for the next several months walking upstairs, it would just get caught under and just fly right under my foot so easily. And I don't remember exactly how long it was, but for, I want to say, the next 2 to 3 years, every now and then, it would just pop up and happen again. And I wasn't having to use my toe to push off and run routes or anything like that. It's such a fickle injury. It has derailed seasons, and it has even completely changed the trajectory of NFL careers. So It's a little bit concerning. I moved Terry back 2 spots in my rankings. I was on the edge of pushing him back a little bit further. I think I did push him back a little bit further, and then I pushed him back up a little bit. But ultimately, what I did do with this is I was more bullish on Jahan Dotson. I moved him up about 6 spots in my rankings at that point. I don't think I've changed that since then. But I had him as wide receiver 38, so I wasn't really high on him at that point in time. So he just jumped a few people that it was a very close call with, and then this added potential to just make him potentially the lead wide receiver if Terry McLaurin is held back by that most of the season or anything. It made me a little more bullish on him. On to Tuesday, Tennessee's wide receiver Kyle Phillips will be missing roughly 6 weeks with an MCL injury, so not good for him. Chicago offensive lineman Tevin Jenkins is week to week with an injury, so that's not great. Let's see. Seattle wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba had a slight fracture in his wrist. Pete Carroll, the most trustworthy source for injury news, says that it'll be 3 to 4 weeks. Remember, this is about a week ago, almost exactly a week ago now that he said that. So 2 to 3 more weeks. And then he said, we'll see. And I don't know if you sense the sarcasm in the trustworthiness of Pete Carroll with injury news. So although that isn't promising for him, bone injuries and the healing of bone injuries is typically pretty darn straightforward. It seems that he should miss 1 to 2 weeks of the regular season of football according to that timeline. The thing is, typically that timeline is more like 6 weeks for bones, I'm not a medical expert, which if it is that typical 6 weeks for a broken bone, a fracture is a broken bone, is just to a less extreme, that would be a 4-week absence in the regular season, which would be a much bigger deal. I moved him down 3 spots in my rankings. I would move him down further, but I'm operating under the idea of having an IR spot to put him on in for weeks 1 or more. And in that case, I wasn't really drafting him thinking I'm going to play him week 1 anyways, so it doesn't change my opinion on him and how high you should draft him too much. On to Wednesday, Carolina's wide receiver DJ Shark had a hamstring injury. It is concerning, and it definitely opens up the door for Jonathan Mingo. Would give you a little bit of more reason to maybe go ahead and draft him in a draft. However, he is a receiver who I didn't really have high confidence on coming into the NFL draft. I was a little bit higher on him early on in the process of looking at things, and then he did not become a my guy or anything like that, and I thought he got taken a little high in the draft. And unfortunately, during the preseason, I did get to watch some of him, and it really looked like he just gave up on a few targets that were sent his way, didn't even try to make a catch. That's concerning. So it's hard for me to get on track with the guy, Jonathan Mingo, and this offense. So if it's not hard for you, then go ahead and get on that train because the opportunity just got better for him. But I'm not overly excited about it. Baltimore's tight end Mark Andrews is dealing with something that is not serious. That is a quote from Coach Harbaugh, who then said there is no need to panic. He expects Mark Andrews to play week 1. Then on Thursday, we have New York Jets wide receiver Alan Lazard, who has an AC joint injury. He'll play week 1, is the expectation at least. Denver wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, last week Thursday, remember? Well, that's the only Thursday. Had a hamstring injury. He is expected to miss several weeks due to that, was the initial reporting. I haven't seen anything different. I moved him from the top of a tier to the bottom of that same tier, and it's just that it's a very strong tier of wide receivers, so missing a couple weeks for me ended up having a big change in my rankings. He went from wide receiver 20 all the way down to wide receiver 32 for me, but just like Jackson Smith and Jigba, you can always place him in your IR spot once he's been ruled out for the week. So usually, sometimes teams wait to rule him out till like the morning of, so you never know. But you'll get an opportunity, especially in week 1, to go ahead and take another flyer on your team. So keep that in mind. He is not going, as of today, just a half hour ago, he is not going on the short-term IR. So that is a positive note for him. Last week, Friday, kicker Jake Moody strained his right quad. He was considered day-to-day. Now on to some other stuff happening. This is going to be more recent stuff or things that I did not go back and update because it was more recent. I didn't have a note to update. First of all, there was a bunch of kicker stuff happening over the past day or two. Mike Badgley was cut from Washington. Actually, this one goes back to like a week and a half ago. First, Mike Badgley was cut from Washington Commanders. Then he must have been picked up, obviously, to the Tennessee Titans squad, and then he was cut from the Tennessee Titans. So Mike Badgley is currently homeless, and got cut twice in like a week. Cameron Dicker won the Los Angeles Chargers job, which led to Cleveland trading for the Los Angeles Chargers kicker Dustin Hopkins and cutting their kicker Cade York. Denver traded for New Orleans longtime kicker Will Lutz. So Will Lutz will be joining Sean Payton in Denver. And Tennessee traded for New England's longtime kicker Nick Folk. Arizona quarterback Colt McCoy was released yesterday, I want to say. So I would expect, maybe that was earlier today, rookie quarterback Clayton Tune to receive the starting nod. Or it could be Joshua Dobbs, but I think they're going to go with Clayton Tune, see what they have in that. Make sure that, especially if they're thinking of drafting Drake May next year, make sure that they don't already have something on their roster that they could not have to do that. Then Kyler Murray will be on the IR list to start the season, which means he'll be missing at least the first 4 weeks on the PUP IR list. Tennessee Titans Treylon Burks returned to practice yesterday as of Monday, so that is good news. And running back Hassan Haskins was placed on the IR, so he'll be out for a while. New York Jets released Zonovan Knight, and I have no doubt that he will find a home. They were just too loaded in their running back room once they added Dalvin Cook onto that roster, so it makes sense there. I was wondering how they're going to keep all those guys. They can't. Then Buffalo Bills defense will not be getting Von Miller back, at least for the first 4 weeks of the year, as he remains on the PUP list. And that was pretty much to be expected. So I wouldn't change my thoughts on that defense as far as the DST, but he is a big player, so I want to make sure that you were aware of that. I think that's the only DST information we have here. New York Giants wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson is being activated off the PUP, which is a good sign for him, but clouds that wide receiver room all the quicker going into the regular season. Mostly, the only player that this really makes any concern for, adds some risk to drafting, is Paris Campbell. And Cole Beasley did not make the 53-man roster today, but they would like to keep him around in case of injuries to the position, as I suggested earlier on in this offseason. On to Kansas City. Yes, Justin Ross made the 53-man roster, so we will be keeping our eyes on his usage as the season goes along, or if you draft him as a sleeper, hopefully that works out for you. Then Baltimore, and I'm not against drafting him as a sleeper, but definitely don't be playing him week 1 expecting something from it. Then Baltimore Ravens running back Melvin Gordon, unsurprisingly, did not make the roster, and I'm sure that they will keep his number on speed dial in case of injury, much like a Cole Beasley. I think with the expanded and new rules for practice squads, these teams are developing relationships with these veteran players, and getting them familiar with their offenses or their defenses, so that way in case of an injury, they already have a guy kind of prepped and ready to go and come into their team and system and just keeping them on their speed dial kind of thing. So I think that's the case for Melvin Gordon in case Baltimore has some more running back injuries. Then we had a trade that we will be talking about here. Philadelphia traded for Broncos tight end Albert O. I don't think that there's any fantasy impact there without injury, but if there is an injury, he would be an interesting option in that offense. He is a very highly talented receiving tight end who just can't quite put it all together. But a new team, new face, new system, you never know. Then Cincinnati's offensive tackle La'el Collins was placed on the PUP list. He will be missing the first 4 weeks, so there's been some optimism at times about him potentially being able to return for week 1, but that will not be happening. I wouldn't change my rankings or anything on any of the Bengals players because of that. New England just released quarterback Bailey Zappi. He did not make the 53-man roster. They waived him. So, that was a surprise. Big surprise. So we'll see what happens with him. On to the preseason games from last week. Going back a couple of weeks, Baltimore versus Washington week 2. Let's see, is this worth stating? Yeah, sure, we'll go back there. So the Washington Commanders played their ones for the first half, and they all looked solid. That was Sam Howell, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson Jr., and Gibson. All looked good. I probably have it somewhere in here, but their rookie, Chris Rodriguez Jr., also has been looking good all preseason, and I hope that doesn't muddy that running back room for people. That could get ugly if it does. Then Baltimore, Gus Edwards didn't have to play. Justice Hill did. I talked a little bit about Justice Hill having a shot as the RB2. I think I got that from the commenters, from the NFL Network's local coverage of the game. And my thought on this is that maybe he's not officially the RB2, but if there's an injury to J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill might get the lead back role with a little bit more input from Gus Edwards there. That's my thoughts on it. So I'm kind of trusting what I heard, even though I haven't seen any other reporting to suggest that outside of the coaching staff has liked Justice Hill and been quite impressed with him. Then Pittsburgh versus Atlanta. It wasn't against the starters, but once again, the Steelers' offense was on point. So you can't dock them for that. They've looked great all offseason, and I think you can be slightly more excited about drafting Pittsburgh players than maybe you were 2 months ago. Atlanta Falcons sat everyone, so nothing to learn there. Indianapolis versus Philadelphia. Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson showed off some wheels, and he also showed off my biggest concern about his weapons for the wide receivers in that offense. Even with 10 targets in a game, Michael Pittman only came down with 4 of them, had 48 yards on that, so that's kind of my biggest concern is these guys are only catching half of their targets, and once again, that was 10 targets, went 4 for 48. I don't know that's going to look a whole lot differently than that in at least every other game, which makes them hard to play. Then Philadelphia, I do see the upside. Philadelphia sat everyone, clearly tried to showcase Trey Sermon to try and trade him. Unfortunately, he didn't really impress, so he was cut today. Nobody wanted to trade for him. Then Detroit versus Carolina. Detroit, I got nothing for you. They didn't start anybody. Carolina, Bryce Young drove down and he scored on 2 drives, got a field goal, and then got a touchdown. He ended the preseason on a high note, so that was good to see. Hasn't been the most impressive preseason for Bryce Young, but it's always good to end on a high note. And we'll see what happens once we get into the regular flow of things with real season football. New England versus Tennessee, nada for both teams. There was nothing to take away from them. Fantasy-wise, Los Angeles Chargers versus San Francisco. Los Angeles Chargers, Josh Kelly continues what I felt like has been a real incline in his production since he got an opportunity later on towards last season, this time making a break for a 75-yard touchdown run. And so I thought he's had a very impressive offseason and an impressive late second half to last season after being a little bit disappointing since he had been drafted. So might get a little bit more usage, and in the event of an injury, I would be all the more wanting of adding Josh Kelly off the waiver wire or drafting him as a backup running back to keep on your roster in case of injury. Then San Francisco, the starters, less Christian McCaffrey, went out for 2 drives, and they looked good in both of those drives, especially the rushing attack looked fantastic. Ayuk had a snafu or 2, but nothing that I would suggest changing, whatever your draft opinions are on him. It wasn't enough to say, oh my gosh, be concerned about him, especially with all the good news that's come out from him, on him this offseason. Buffalo versus Chicago. Buffalo, my biggest concern for James Cook has been the touchdown upside, in part due to the Damian Harris probably being the goal line back, and then you also add in the quarterback situation, rushing quarterback who can get touchdowns from 5-10 yards out as well. And in this situation in the preseason, we did indeed see Damian Harris come out with the ones once they got near the goal line. From the 2-yard line out, he ran in, got a touchdown. Chicago, DJ Moore had another big play, 40-yard reception. That was it. Wasn't an ultra impressive showing from the Chicago offense, but I want to say they got a field goal maybe. I don't know. Seattle versus Green Bay. Seattle's Zach Charbonnet didn't get too much work, which is a positive for a rookie on a day where they sat a lot of their ones. So they just got him out there, got him a little bit more experience, and then sat him immediately, which means that they have plans for him. I think that's how I take it. Then Green Bay, we saw Luke Musgrave continue to get open. Jordan Love once again looked all right. And in regards to fantasy value, we saw him take off on a few rushes. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about. He is an athletic quarterback. And that is a part of his game that could definitely add some fantasy value. So keep that in mind with Jordan Love. Not suggesting necessarily to draft him in single quarterback leagues, but as a backup quarterback, I think he might be worth a risk, depending on who is left on the board at that time. Arizona versus Minneapolis. Corey Clement ran well, but he was also used a lot despite several starters sitting this game out. I thought there was a chance that he'd be a regular part of their rushing attack in a three-headed approach, but given his usage, I doubt that's the case. That's what I wrote after the game, and I wrote that that's obviously a good sign for James Conner. He was cut today, so yeah, obviously not the case. Looks like it will just be a typical two running back approach. James Conner already projected very, very well in my projections, and that was including Corey Clement taking up some work, like a decent portion for a third running back. So, I mean, they're tanking and all. Touchdowns might not be there, but James Conner could get a lot of work. Well, he's healthy at least. Then Dwayne Bride from Minnesota had a solid game to finish the preseason on. He had not had a very good preseason, and he's going to have to take that tape and send it to a few teams because he was cut today. So I'm sure he would like to make it on a practice squad. I guess he'll probably find his way into Minnesota's practice squad, but maybe not. So we'll see. On to Cleveland versus Kansas City. Cleveland, I wouldn't call it an impressive performance for Deshaun Watson, but he did get the job done, and he hit Amari Cooper for a 53-yard bomb, so that was nice to see. Kansas City Chiefs, Rashee Rice and Justin Ross once again saw the most targets, and of course they did both make the roster. 53-man roster. New York Jets versus the New York Giants. New York Jets, in case you were concerned, that Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson connection is absolutely for real, and it has a chance to be absolutely dynamic. Then the New York Giants, I got nothing for you. There was they didn't play starters or anything. There's nothing to take away from that or any of the interesting rookies, good or bad. Cincinnati versus Washington. Cincinnati's Chase Brown finally did okay. He is clearly not going to be the RB2 to start the season. And, there's always my guy who immediately disappoints. And so far, Chase Brown has definitely been that for me. Then Washington Commanders rookie running back Chris Rodriguez continues to impress. He averaged 7.4 yards per carry on 7 carries. Be prepared to jump on him on the waiver wire at some point in the season if things start to point in that direction. Would I be shocked if he ends up being the lead back in that offense at some point? I wouldn't, based on what we saw last year from, I can't think of his name, their starting running back. So, keep an eye on that situation. Miami versus Jacksonville. Miami starters played a little bit. I don't think there is anything to take away from their performances. I will say there is now evidence to suggest that Tua's training in jiu-jitsu has been beneficial for him. We have seen some evidence that when he's taken falls, that training has helped him to learn how to take a fall without putting his head into danger of smacking back. Then we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Travis Etienne and Tank both looked good again, very good. Trevor was absolutely locked in as a quarterback, and Calvin Ridley had 3 receptions for 50 yards. Christian Kirk only had 2 targets, 1 reception for 8 yards. All in all, though, it's what you want to see from this offense. They were looking good. Then Baltimore versus Tampa Bay. Baltimore's rookie wide receiver Dante Demas Jr. had a good night. Might be the reason that they ended up cutting long-term James Prochet. A little bit different receiver, but they might not have felt, they might have liked Dante Demas Jr.'s upside enough. Same with second-year tight end Charlie Kolar. 2 names to keep your eyes on, especially if you're in a dynasty league. Charlie Kolar was a guy that some felt had a little bit of Travis Kelce in his game coming out of college, and Dante Demas is a big-bodied receiver with okay speed and acceleration for his size. So I say that as a positive. I know I just used the word okay, but it's not amazing. Still, for his size, pretty good. I would say they are assets to his game to an extent, who could bring an interesting element to the Todd Monken offense, most definitely. Would be a very interesting player in that offense if he works his way into a top 3 role probably next season, or with an injury to Odell Beckham Jr. would be probably the guy he'd replace. Then Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield went 6 of 6, and he ended his drive with a touchdown. Rachaad White was efficient, something we did not see last year with that offensive line. I think was a lot of the reason for those running backs. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry, and Godwin was on the receiving end of 4 of Baker's 6 targets, one of them being the touchdown. Based on preseason results, it definitely seems that rookie wide receiver Trey Palmer has won the job of the wide receiver 3 on this offense, and that should put Godwin in the slot more often now, which is especially exciting if you're in a full PPR scoring format. Chris Godwin, you saw it a little bit in this game, could be a target hog in the slot there for that team. Las Vegas versus Dallas. Las Vegas rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell continued to do quite well. I don't expect him to be starting at any point this season over Jimmy G, but in the event that Jimmy G struggles, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise that could happen this season come midseason. Dallas running back Rico Dowdle, I told you this would come back, got the game off, leaving no doubt as to who the running back 2 will be in Dallas. That was a note I wrote at that point in time. And then today, Malik Davis was cut. I was saving that one for this note, which, that really makes things clear to me who's the RB2 there. So, Rico Dowdle is your draft and stash running back for the Dallas Cowboys if you so wish. And that's not there's concerns over Tony Pollard and how he'll hold up through a full workload. So, not the worst option. Los Angeles Rams versus the Denver Broncos. Kyren Williams for the Rams running back appears to be the clear RB2, and Ronnie Rivers has been fairly impressive on the ground this offseason, and that may leave rookie running back Zach Evans as the RB4 going into the year. I haven't seen if any of them got cut. I didn't see that any of them got cut. Then for the Denver Broncos, Marvin Mims showed off some stuff on an end around that he received, so that's nice to see that they would think about using him in that role. 3 yards. Those rushing yards, they just pad the stats a little bit extra, and you never know when they might break one. And then catching both of his targets for 51 yards was also nice. He's a big play boy, so good to see. Houston versus New Orleans. Houston, this is a long note here. C.J. Stroud threw for a touchdown, so that's good. It's tough to take too much away from a 2 for 4 for 16-yard night, though. Devin Singletary has not been used a lot with the ones on the field. So Devin Singletary, Dameon Pierce, I moved Dameon Pierce up 1 spot in my rankings. Devin Singletary back like 4 or 5 spots. It appears that I might have been a little bit off on my expectations for how they would implement those 2 running backs, so I wanted to represent that in my rankings. So that is something that I have updated based on how we have seen them implement that backfield this offseason. Also, Nico Collins was once again on the receiving end of a touchdown throw from C.J. Stroud. I'm not 100% sure that his previous touchdown this offseason was from C.J. Stroud. If I'm wrong, please leave a note just so others can see that. But he has gotten 2 touchdowns at least this offseason, and I believe both from C.J. Stroud. Tank Dell didn't do anything after sitting out in week 2 with some tightness pre-game. I still think that is going to be tough for him to get out on the field enough to be able to trust in fantasy football, but that week 1 performance in the preseason was one of those where it's like it's going to be hard to keep him on the sidelines. So, we will see how that ends up shaking out. I'd take the risk on him being available on the waiver wire and picking him up in like week 3 or something, hoping for a mid to late season breakout, especially if somebody else drafts him, then they might drop him. It's kind of what I'm getting at. I wouldn't really go out and draft him. I think you'll end up replacing him before he breaks out. How it works. New Orleans, interesting second-year tight end prospect Lucas Kroll had a day. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 106 yards. I wonder if he made the team. Wonder if they were trying to showcase him, trying to get a trade done with him. I didn't see that he got cut, though. That's all I have for this episode. Let's wrap this darn thing up. What are we at? Over a half hour. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Hope you learned some things to take into your drafts this weekend. Peace out.